Hello, everyone, and welcome to this edition of Wine Women and Words. Joining us today is Michelle,
Hello.
and joining us as our guest for this week, we have Lee Bukowski here to talk about her book, The Week of Warm Weather. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. I'm really happy to be here.
So, for those who are not familiar with the book, could you give us a little synopsis about it?
Yes. So actually, this is my 1 year anniversary. So the book launched in June of 2022. So it's like this is kind of a nice little birthday party. But it is a women's fiction novel, and like most women's fiction, it is it's the story of a character's journey. So Tessa is a young wife and mother. She has had a trauma in her childhood that she's buried. She's not dealt with it. And as a young wife, she is in this marriage where her husband begins behaving strangely, and his behavior sort of resurrects this trauma from her childhood and forces her to sort of unearth what happened to her, and so that she can not only deal with that in the past, but then also learn how to deal with what's happening in her present, in her marriage. And so, the stakes are very high for her. And she, in sort of this journey in uncovering her past and dealing with that trauma, she is sort of learning what she needs to do to break the cycle of sort of this generational trauma that she's lived through. So it's really her journey to figure out, I always say how much she's willing to lose in order to find herself. And so it's really a story of her journey.
I love the heroine's journey. I think that's a fantastic book, and that's something that I think we all can resonate with, is the heroine's journey, because it's different from the standard hero's journey, and women have so many different lived experiences and whatnot. And I understand with talking about trauma, it feels like such a hot button word, but when you have things that are left unresolved, it's that trauma still comes. So even if you do have it resolved, I suppose you still have it pop back up. What were some of the things for you with writing about trauma in this story? Because I have words, I swear.
I think I realized as I was writing the book that I really, and I think that all debut authors, and you can probably speak to this, we kind of go through this, this idea where we just sort of pick apart our own lives and we start to think about our characters and we sort of take that journey with them. And I think I realized in writing about trauma, there's a real difference between pain and trauma. And I think that the difference is that trauma stays with you. And as you said, Diana, even if you resolve it, it's still there. It doesn't go away. And I think it's kind of that stamp, And so for me, I feel like Tessa, my character, helped me to kind of look at maybe some issues in my own life that I hadn't dealt with, and to sort of look at, okay, there's a reason Tessa behaves the way she does, right? And there's a reason that especially people who have been through, pain and or trauma, it affects you in certain ways. So and not to give spoilers, but in Tessa's case, she's a real people pleaser, and she really stays in her lane, and she doesn't want to, make any big sudden movements that will upset anybody. And so she really has to, I think, examine that, and really, I think that's what I learned that trauma does, is it unresolved or not, but especially unresolved, it really makes you take a look at the effects of it, because if you don't deal with it, then you really do live with the effects of it. And the generational trauma is what really struck me. And with Tessa being a young mother as well, she's not only looking back at her past and her childhood, now she has a baby and a toddler. And so she's got to figure out, listen, if I don't deal with this, if I don't figure out, how this has affected me, moving forward, I'm just going to pass this on to my own children. And so that was one of the things that I think really struck me in the writing of the book.
I think it was our April book of the month, or earlier, Jamie Ford's The Many Daughters of
Yes.
Afamoy, that talked a lot about generational trauma. And I mean, it's from a writer standpoint and from someone who loves going down, research rabbit holes, that's such an interesting and like really fascinating topic to read about, because it is kind of mind-blowing to think about the things that you don't even realize you might be carrying that can be passed down. And as a writer, if you're exploring that in a story that you're working on, to kind of be like the mastermind planting all of these seeds, it's almost like you kind of get like a behind the scenes look at what that can look like for a character who's going through that.
Mhm. Also, you don't realize it, right? Nobody says,
Mm-hmm.
I've got all this unresolved crap and I'm going to now just not worry about it and pass it on to my own kids. You don't even realize it. I
Mm-hmm.
think until maybe you see then your own children exhibiting some of those traits. And so I think it to me, when I was writing the book, I really had like all these, it was almost like counseling for me, because I had to stop and think, wait a minute, so this and this, and maybe now that led to this and this. And so it's often, nobody says, you know what, I think I'll really mess up my kids. Nobody says that. But it's we do our best, but the idea of generational trauma, I did do research on, and especially in just talking to people I knew, but it's a real thing, and I didn't really think about that line of that sort of storyline until I actually began writing this story. But it's very, very interesting.
Mm-hmm.
And I love the fact that you brought up you did research on it, because oftentimes people just associate research with historical fiction.
Right.
But when you're doing a book, regardless of the genre, you have to do some sort of level of research for the novel.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think people tend to think of research, as you said, like historical, to make sure, and this, people will check, did you get this right, that fact right? But there's really oftentimes, I think, no substitute for talking to people who have the same lived experiences, because they're experts, right? They're experts because they've lived through it, and they've either come out on the other side or they haven't. But that's research, and so I think it's every bit as valuable. And one of the things I was very touched by is the willingness of people to talk about these issues, which I'm all about. I like to think of myself as pretty evolved. You write a book and you really do put yourself out there, and so I kind of resolve myself to like, listen, if people want to talk about issues, and they're issues that relate to me and not just my characters, I'm very willing to talk about those things, because I think, even though you tend to think of self-help books like for issues like this, but I think fiction books involving characters who go through these and have these lived experiences, it gives you the feeling. Like there's always the self-help book that you can do to say, okay, now I've figured all this out, so now I've got this book that can say, okay, you should do this, this, and this. But I've had many people who have either lived with addicts or loved addicts or had some of these issues in my book, who say, you know what, I really appreciated reading the story. It made me be able to, it kind of validated the way I felt when I was going through this, or I realized why my mother behaved the way she did, or so I think it's that lived experience, that research, that is research, really talking to people who've gone through it. And like I said, I've really been very, very touched by people's willingness to, share their own experiences, and to also share with me the ways that the book resonates with them. Because I think that we do read fiction for those reasons. We connect with characters, and even though it's fiction, it kind of lets us know that people are maybe going through the same things that we are.
And
sorry.
no, go ahead, Michelle.
We're off out of sync tonight. But I was going to say, there is nothing like the experience of really truly like connecting with a fictional character, but like reading that fictional character who you just know exactly what they're going through, or you have gone through whatever they're going through, or even you could be reading a fantasy novel and the main character is trying to master their magic powers, but there's always something in an element of the challenges or the experiences, and to be able to connect with a character like that. I just finished reading a book and I miss the characters, like I and having that that bond kind of with the story really makes readers feel not alone in whatever they're going through.
Yeah, they take that journey with your character, and like I said, even though it's fiction, just as you said, it makes them feel less alone, because I think a lot of people, and especially nowadays, I think we're more, social media has opened up, all new avenues, but not that long ago, people did not talk about, addiction and abandonment and, these things that because there's a lot of shame associated with it that, really doesn't belong to the person, but they carry that shame all just the same. And so I think that connection, I think that's one of the things that I know that women's fiction, that term is sort of coming under scrutiny. Like, do we still want to use that? But I think it's such a very important characteristic of women's fiction is it really is very, very much character driven rather than plot driven, because you're really just taking the reader on the journey with your character, with your main character.
And really, when it comes to the age-old advice, write what you know, I feel that a lot of writers in general, whether you're new or you're an older writer, more experienced writer, I don't want to say old writer because
Right.
sometimes I feel like I come under that category, but regardless of where you are in your writing journey, the idea of write what you know gets misconstrued with, okay, I'm going to be a sci-fi writer, so I'm going to write about tech stuff so I can understand it. I'm a historical fiction writer, so I need to get a degree in history to be able to write that. And when you say it out loud, you're like, what?
But
it's the adage is write what you know, and what you should know as a writer is human behavior. And that basic humanness, that's the one thing that ties all those different genres together, and do like what you did, where you just sat down and talked to these people for research. And I think what makes historical fiction is that human experience within those historical events. So my little soapbox.
Now, I know we've kind of already been talking about this, but one aspect, of course, in A Week of Warm Weather is Tessa's friendship with, I want to say, Cece, who is, of course, the new person in town and doesn't, new people in town and new people in neighborhoods have such unique perspectives because they're coming in with a completely clean slate. So they don't know any of the drama that may or may not be going on. But what was that like to kind of explore that friendship with Tessa and Cece?
Cece, for Tessa, becomes a safe haven because Tessa lives in a world filled with secrets, filled with lies. She's really just an actress in her life. And she is she's in a big Italian family. And as you know, you're all in each other's business all the time.
Yep.
It's my husband will be like, my mom doesn't know when I'm on a business trip. Your mom knows when you go from the kitchen to the family room. Like, you all have to get on the phone. Like, why did you do that? Why did you change seats? And so Tessa, it's hard to keep secrets in a very close family like that. So when she meets Cece, she really becomes this person with whom Tessa can really let her hair down, because she doesn't have to be on guard. She doesn't have to lie. She doesn't have to, well, Ken is here. He's going to be here at 7:00, knowing that he very well might not be. Cece is a person with whom Tessa can just completely be herself and be at ease. And I think, that it brings a new dimension to when a person like Tessa is living a life of codependency, because that's really what she's doing. She's very codependent. She takes on Ken's stuff. She's got the stuff from her past. She's got everybody's stuff. And so it was really, as you say, it was that the female friendship aspect of it. And there are some things that come out later, but Cece really becomes for Tessa the only kind of that bastion of, she looks for her. She goes to the park with the baby and she looks for her because here's a person with whom she doesn't have to pretend. She doesn't have to lie. She doesn't have to feel stressed. Cece doesn't know anything about her or her family or her marriage. So she's not asking the questions that everybody else who's close to Tessa is asking her. And so, I think it really, it becomes sort of that, because I think female friendships are like that. They're very forgiving. They're very understanding. I think women have a very nice way of a good friend. And again, there's some things that come out later in the novel, but they'll let you, there's a spool of thread there, but they're not gonna yank it. They're gonna just maybe tug a little bit. But Cece really lets Tessa reveal only what she wants to. She doesn't push her. She can see that there's something maybe not quite right, but she doesn't push her. She doesn't make her feel, like she's under a microscope, because Tessa really feels like, listen, if Ken gets his act together, you can't put that toothpaste back in the tube. So she doesn't really want to come clean. She doesn't want to open that closet door and let all the crap come tumbling out, because you can't put it back in. And so, Cece is really that consummate female friend with whom you can just be at ease with. And I think a lot of people also can relate to that.
Diana and I, we have been friends for many moons. we don't need to say exactly how many moons, but many moons.
Just a few moons in there.
But those friends that will stand by you through the highs and the lows and the crappy days and the days where you don't want to do anything and the days where you're doing all the things. Those are the friends that you want to hang on to. And the friends who will tell you what you need to hear, not what you want to hear.
And Cece does that. She kind of, and again, without any spoilers, there's some things that come out later, but she listens for a long time before she says, wait a minute, and she'll, she chimes in, but she doesn't push Tessa. She lets Tessa, she's a good listener. And I think that's sometimes something that's in short supply, because, we don't always want someone to fix things. Sometimes we just need someone to just kind of be there and, maybe talk about the weather and talk about whatever, and, what you're watching on Netflix or whatever, because you really just, you're not ready to face what's going on. And so, it's that kind of friend who lets you just sort of be you and know that maybe one day you'll come clean with, Cece can sense that there's something maybe, that Tessa's not talking about, but she doesn't push her. And so, as you said, you just want to know you have that friend that, that's going to let you just let it out as you see fit and not push you for like, come on, tell me what's going on. Tell me what's going on.
So now we have to, oh no, you go.
No, you go.
Now we do have our super scientific survey about plotting versus pantsing, because Diana and I, when it comes to our writing, I am a pantser. I like to sit down and let my characters decide what we're doing today and what's going to be said and what will be happening. And Diana likes to, it says she's a historical fiction writer, so by necessity, there is a level of plotting that goes into that. But in the real world, I do not appreciate chaos as much as Diana does. I'm very organized. I have my to-do lists and I check things off, and I love the feeling of checking things off. And Diana is not like that.
I
So
mean, there's a point where having a to-do list just felt like it was a chain that was holding me back, and anxiety, like just having a to-do list was things that give me anxiety, which I'm better now about that. But still, when it comes to like being as organized as Michelle, I think I break out in hives.
so we like to ask our writers if they are plotters or pantsers in the writing world, and then if they are chaos embracers, or if they are a little more on the organized side, with the outside world.
So my non-writer life, I'm very organized. I always have a plan, or usually have a plan. I'm getting better. My kids have told me I'm getting much better, that if something doesn't go quite according to plan, I don't go to pieces. But I like to have a plan. I like to, I have checklists and the whole bit. I can show you all my, my sticky notes with my checklist and everything that I have, already. In terms of my writing, it's interesting because in A Week of Warm Weather, I feel like I knew the story from start to finish. Now, there was a little bit of, editing, and originally it had started in the hospital when the baby's born. Later, it's at home, so there's a little bit of that. But I kind of knew, I knew where it started. I knew where I wanted to go with it, and I pretty much knew where I wanted it to end. So I felt like I had an outline, even if a lot of it was in my head, but I still kind of plotted it out. I'm working on my second book now, and it's not going as well because I know the beginning, and I know in the middle, and I know the end, but it's that nasty middle 200 pages. So what I've done is I've said, okay, to avoid like major, and of course there's going to be editing, there always is, there's going to be cutting things, there always is, but to avoid too much of that, I've decided to, there's a book that I love, it's called Blueprint for a Book. I don't know if you're familiar with it. It's Jenny Nash.
No. That's a new one.
She's got this really interesting thing. She calls it the inside outline. And so she kind of forces you to go through these exercises, and it seems tedious, but it really it's kind of forcing me to make sure that anything I'm including is germane to the plot. So I've written the first 4 chapters, and I'm semi sort of happy with them. I mean, the first time I wrote them, they were garbage, so I had to go back and, of course, fix them. But now I'm like, okay, I need to stop. I'm going to work on this inside outline. So basically, to kind of go through it scene by scene. And of course, I'll change and edit and revise. But to avoid the getting 100 pages in and going, no, that's really not what I wanted to do at all, and then have to scrap 70 pages. So I think that was a long answer to your question. I feel like I really knew the story in A Week of Warm Weather. In this one, in my second novel, I know, and again, it's a character's journey. Again, she's got a pain point that I think will resonate with readers. But this what Jenny Nash does is really keeps you focused on who's my ideal reader, what's she looking for in a book, what's missing in her life, what is reading your book going to help her with. And so this inside outline really kind of helps stay on track and not put in a whole lot of superfluous stuff, which of course there will be some of that anyway. So I think I was definitely, the first one I don't know if that's being a pantser, because it was all up here. This one I'm trying to be much more structured, and not, for the sake of not having to like throw the whole thing away and like want to jump off the roof kind of thing, just trying to get it a little bit more settled in my head before I go any further with it. But in my non-writing life, I'm very, very organized.
But it's the outline. The outline is what's going to save you for that sticky middle. That's always that gets everybody in the outline.
Yeah,
and the component of outlining because of that.
I teach college freshman writing, and when I say outline, I think people tend to think of an outline like in a writing course where you have the the letter, and then the Roman numerals, and then the letters, and then the bullet. And this is a little bit different. The way that Jenny Nash does it is, it's basically scene, what's the scene, and what's the point. So that means if you can't come up with a point, like how does that scene further your protagonist's journey? If it doesn't, get rid of it. So it's basically scene, point, scene, point, scene, point. So if there's no point to the scene, if it doesn't, so my character's whole thing is she thinks that what is missing from her life, and what the only thing that's missing that will make her happy, is a husband and children of her own. That's it. She thinks that is that's her only path to happiness. And in the very beginning, in the first few pages of the book, that is taken away from her. And so she kind of goes down this path where, okay, and I know it does sound tropey, I know there's nothing new under the sun, but it's not like, it's not like, okay, her husband leaves or whatever, but she's like, bam, hit in the face with a situation. And she has to think like, okay, this is what I think I need in my life. So every scene is sort of bringing her toward this discovery that there's going to be another way. That's not real. She thinks it's her only chance for happiness. Of course it's not. So every scene has to go toward that. And if it doesn't, according to this book, Blueprint for a Book, just get rid of it, because the reader will know. The idea is that the reader will know, like, you just thought this was interesting, or you kind of put this in because it reminds you of your quirky neighbor, or, and so it kind of streamlines it. But it's basically like every scene has to have a point. And if it doesn't, take it out.
I love that. It's very easy to get lost in scenes that could be really fun to write, or you really love them, but if you're being 100% honest with yourself, they don't further the plot at all.
Exactly. That's exactly it.
Well, everyone, if you would like to order your own copy of A Week of Warm Weather, which happy first anniversary to
Thank you.
Please be sure to check out our show notes. Of course, the link to our bookshop on bookshop.org will be there. Bookshop.org supports our incredible writers. It does support the podcast, but most importantly, it supports all of the wonderful indie bookstores out there. And Lee, thank you so much for making time for us tonight and letting us pick your brain about this book.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate being on.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Enjoy the rest of your evening.
Thank you. You too.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.